want to welcome everyone in this evening. We're going to give everyone an opportunity to kind of join. Thanks for being on time and joining us this evening. We're going to give everyone about another minute or so to kind of get in the room and get comfortable. Find you a good seat, and we'll be back in shortly.
Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Good evening. Welcome to the County of San Diego's Green Street Clean Water Plan. My name is Sherry McPherson, and I'm a project manager with the County of San Diego. And joining me on this effort is Renee Vidales, Charles Morlock, both with the County of San Diego, Max Dugan, Megan Otto, and Ken Cecilio with Geosyntec Consultants. We're here tonight to kind of talk to you about our Green Streets Plan effort, the vision for this plan, and to let you know what's being considered for your community, and to understand both the potential hopes and concerns to help your hopes and concerns to help us tailor the projects down the road. Before we get started, I just want to go through a few housekeeping things for this evening. First of all, we do want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded. We encourage you to send your questions by using the Q&A feature located among the users controls at the bottom of your Zoom screen. While the chat feature will be disabled during this webinar, if you have any technical questions along with the subject matter questions, we have several moderators who are on standby who will be able to assist you. So go ahead and use the Q&A. At the conclusion of the webinar, we'll field as many questions as possible with respect to our time. Again, you can use the Q&A function during the webinar to submit your questions. Should we not get to your questions, but
please know that we'll make an effort to get to you
afterwards.
All right. Thank you, everybody. I'm Renee Vidales with the County of San Diego Watershed Protection Program. And I would like to start with a quick poll that has, a couple of questions that are, important for us to understand, who the audience is. So if we could have the poll questions pulled up. Thank you. Question number one is, do you live in the unincorporated county? And question number two is, did you attend the July 7th stakeholder meeting or watch the recorded webinar, or neither of the above? So while we are answering the questions, I can give you, what the outline is for the workshop. So we're going to be talking about drivers and objectives. We're going to be telling you a little bit about the Green Streets Clean Water Program, what it is, and how far we're going with it. We're also going to tell you about the concept of green streets, explaining you what it is. We're going to tell you about the project identification process, how we're identifying projects, initial results of our research. We're going to show you an example project to illustrate, our intent, and we're going to lay out some opportunities for further involvement. We're going to conclude the webinar with Q&A, and throughout the webinar, you can submit your questions through the Q&A window. So we have some results. So apparently the majority of you said that you live in an unincorporated county. And for question number two, I can see that, some people attended remotely. Some people watched the recorded webinar, and the majority apparently did not either attend the webinar or watch the recorded webinar. So that's fine because we're covering a lot of ground that we didn't, covering a lot of ground in order to show you, a portion of what we did on the first workshop. So stay tuned. All right, so next slide, thank you. So I'm gonna show you an illustration here and pretty much showing you what the process is when it rains. So during the rainy season, runoff or stormwater, what we call it, collects along roads, in ditches, in gutters, and ultimately in storm drains, as you can see in the image here. So during the dry season, when it doesn't rain, runoff is created from irrigation and other sources. Both of these scenarios can include pollutants like trash, bacteria, metals, sediments, and nutrients. Next slide, please. So pollution impacts the uses of the water body. That's where all the storm drain gets discharged to. For example, fishing can be impacted by algae blooms and fish kills. Beaches can be closed and swimmers can get sick. So, pretty much runoff, whether it's from wet weather or dry weather, affects water bodies. Next slide. Coupled with other county programs, the Green Streets Clean Water Program, which is what we're describing here, is one tool in the toolbox to further reduce pollution. Like you can see in the image here, we're trying to utilize available spaces in the public right of way to further provide treatment for runoff. Next. This effort is being driven by the need to implement strategies to further the water quality goals established in the current stormwater regulations. This planning effort will identify candidate Green Streets projects across 8 watersheds to retrofit existing developed areas. Not only will we identify projects with the most water quality benefits, but we will also be using the triple bottom line approach to maximize environmental, community, and financial benefits. We also want to make sure that we're taking advantage of the county's existing green infrastructure guidance and that we have a good distribution of projects across the watersheds. So not only do we have the county's green infrastructure guidance, we also have Green Street standard drawings. And like you can see on the left, the needs, that's driving the program are on the left and the objectives of the program are on the right. Next slide, please. The end product of this initial planning effort will be called the Green Streets Clean Water Plan, like is shown in the image, which will identify and prioritize the highest multi-benefit projects within the study area. It will essentially serve as a menu of opportunities that can be phased in over time. So now, starting from the beginning of the planning process, let's take a first look at where the study area is. Next. And I'm going to pass it on to Megan Odo to continue with the presentation.
Thanks, Renee. So the regulations that Renee described driving this study are focused primarily on, or not entirely, I will say, on the westward draining watersheds. So that means that starting with the entire unincorporated county, we're looking at the areas that drain toward the coast. Additionally, we focused on the more densely developed areas since the types of land uses in these areas produce higher levels of pollutant and runoff. So to this end, we focused first of all in the unincorporated village centers and extended this boundary by 2 miles to also look at the transition areas between the village centers and the outer rural areas. So these are the areas shown in the brighter colors here is where our study area began. In total, this covers 580 square miles and includes more than 20 community planning areas. We next narrowed the study area to specific catchments or drainage basins that intersect the county maintained roads, as this is where the Green Streets projects would be located, like Renee mentioned. We also eliminated small catchment areas to focus on the more impactful opportunities. This left 6,000 catchments to evaluate and prioritize, and we'll get into that, the next stage of that in a bit. But before we get into kind of the technical detail, first I want to talk about some of the bigger picture benefits of Green Streets. So these are broadly grouped into environmental, community, and economic benefits, and I'll just talk through a few of them. So looking at environmental benefits, as Renee mentioned, water quality is the primary driver, but you can also get things such as habitat enhancement, depending on if the Green Streets projects are vegetated and what types of vegetation is used. You can also have cooling provided by that vegetation and potentially enhancements to the groundwater supply if you have good soils and are above a groundwater aquifer. Looking at community benefits, projects can provide shading along pedestrian corridors if they include trees, and also support things such as traffic calming and pedestrian safety, as well as the other benefits noted here. From an economic lens, there is potential to provide local jobs during construction and maintenance as one example, and other benefits as well. So I will note that in the bottom right-hand corner, there is a QR code. And if you're able to scan that, you can take a survey on the greenstreetscleanwater.org website. And we would love to get your thoughts on kind of which of these benefits are most important to your community. And then to the extent possible, the way that the projects come out of this, they can be modified in such a way to suit what the community needs. So I'd encourage you either to take the survey now or take it at the ideally at the end of the presentation. And with that, I'll pass it over to Max to get into kind of more the technical detail as to what green streets are.
Thanks, Megan. So again, this is Max Dugan with Geosyntech Consultants. And like she said, I'm going to dive into some of the technical details and kind of give you a little background on what some of these green streets elements look like, what they do, how they function. So to start, these elements are located along the roadways within the right-of-way. They are water quality treatment devices that use natural processes to improve water quality by removing pollutants. And to do this, they use natural processes like filtration, percolation of water into the underground subsurface, and then uptake of nutrients and pollutants through plant roots. They also take advantage of evapotranspiration and interception to decrease the amount of rainfall that lands on the impervious surfaces and eventually runs off, and have a number of other benefits as well. So again, these use natural processes, so they're not using energy or reliant on chemicals to provide treatment like a water treatment or a wastewater treatment plant. And they can utilize both above ground and underground space. So sometimes you're not going to always see the elements that are providing the treatment. To give a little bit of an example, on the left-hand side, we have kind of a conventional street design approach. So this particular street has traffic in two directions. There's a parking lane, a parallel parking lane on either side. There's a bike lane and then a sidewalk on each side. And this looks like maybe a newer street because it does have incorporated some water quality treatment elements. You see on either side of the sidewalk, there is a vegetated biofiltration swale with some underground storage components. So this is kind of an ideal typical street where, yes, it's mainly all paved, but there is bike and pedestrian access, and there is some water quality treatment on the side. Many streets that we have don't look like this even, but what we want to do is move forward to kind of a green street design approach that incorporates these elements more kind of in an integral way into the street itself. So on the right-hand side is a picture of a typical green streets illustration where instead of that impermeable median within the center of the roadway dividing the lanes, we have a permeable median that can accept some either direct rainfall and infiltrate it, or even sometimes run off from adjacent travel lanes and provide some interception and treatment there. Then along the parking lanes, this example has incorporated permeable pavement, which again will help catch and percolate some of that stormwater into the subsurface, keeping it out of the local creeks, streams, and rivers. And then we've used here a biofiltration or bioretention swale and potentially some tree wells to set that sidewalk back from the travelway and provide some physical separation and distance, which makes pedestrian access and mobility, increases safety of mobility along this travelway. So this is just one example, and we're going to dive into kind of some of these specific elements in the next few slides. Like I mentioned, green streets treatment elements can both be visible above ground or they can be below ground and have less of a visual impact. Things like biofiltration basins, tree wells, dispersion areas, and permeable pavement are all pretty visible elements from above ground. When they're installed, you're going to see them and you're going to know that they're there. Some of the below ground elements are going to be less visible and you might not even know that they're there. Those include hydrodynamic separators and dry wells. But in many cases, a combination of these devices are used, and sometimes they're best used in sort of a treatment train approach with multiple BMPs providing a combination of benefits. But what do these look like individually? So a biofiltration basin is kind of one of the most common Green Streets BMPs, and it uses filtration to treat runoff using plants and engineered soil, so specially designed soil that filters the runoff and helps remove the pollutants. And then that water is then collected either in an under drain and discharged to the storm drain, or some of it's even just percolated into the subsurface and can be used to recharge local groundwater aquifers. Again, it takes runoff from adjacent impervious areas. That could be the road, that could be the sidewalk, or surrounding properties, and treats it vertically, starting at the surface with the plants. The next slide shows an example of a small biofiltration basin installed between the sidewalk and parking lane on a street. Tree wells are similar to biofiltration basins, but there are a few key differences. Biofiltration basins are using smaller shrubs and grasses, so they have a less of a visual impact. Tree wells use larger vegetation like trees, so they're much more visible elements of within the right of way. The use of the trees provides a few benefits. One, again, it enhances the aesthetics of the street and potentially the neighborhood. It provides shade, which can help offset urban heat island effects. The trees themselves can provide additional habitat for nesting birds and other habitat opportunities. But similar to biofiltration basins, these are using media filtration and root uptake to provide water quality benefit. Next slide shows an example of some recently installed tree wells within a neighborhood, again, separating the street from the sidewalk. Dispersion areas are a third kind of surface BMP. These are used to spread and slow runoff down before it reaches the receiving waters. This helps lower the peak flows and volumes of stormwater. These are used typically in place of channels or conveyances that are hard lined and paved and move water quickly through a system and can contribute to flooding issues. These are visible from the surface and they help increase habitat and green space within communities. And when they are used without under drains, they too can promote additional infiltration and percolation of water into the subsurface. Here's an example of a couple dispersion areas along the street. Permeable pavement is our last surface BMP that we're going to talk about. Again, it collects runoff that runs on from adjacent areas, but also direct rainfall helps infiltrate that through the pavement surface and then into the subsurface. These are mostly used in parallel parking areas or along sidewalks and walkways, but can be a valuable tool in helping reduce the amount of impervious area and amount of runoff in our right-of-way. And here's a few examples. The one on the left shows permeable pavers within a parking area. And then the one on the right is actually a permeable asphalt pavement used in a parking lane. So the next two BMPs are subsurface. And so these have a much smaller surface footprint. You might not even know that they're there. They're typically just identified by some surface inlets and access hatch. But they use hydrodynamic separators, particularly use gravity to filter runoff. And really it's a mimicking of natural kind of settling and collection that would happen in rocky streams with drops and falls and eddies. And it really helps collect the trash and debris, isolate it, get it out of that water flow before it enters our waterways. And then it drops down into a collection basin, and then that can be cleaned up by crews and kept out of our waterways. These are located underground and typically used in combination with other BMPs to help maximize benefits. Dry wells, again, are used primarily to collect larger volumes of water and percolate them into the ground. This can help reduce, in certain areas, reduce the impacts of flooding. And again, like hydrodynamic separators, they're used underground and are typically used in combination to maximize benefits of other surface systems. So what does this look like when it's all put together? Here's another more visual example. On the top of the screen, we've got permeable pavement, a combination of swales and biofiltration basins that are collecting runoff from the roadway and adjacent areas and filtering it, slowing it down, getting that water into the ground and removing those pollutants before it gets to our waterways. And then on the bottom half of the road, again, we have permeable pavement that's added into the parking areas. We even see some bulb outs that help protect those parking areas, slow vehicles in those areas. And then we have an example of a tree well that's using some structural soil to support the adjacent sidewalk. And then a few biofiltration basins and planter boxes as well. And so here, one of the concepts of this image that we like is that it illustrates that, yes, these things can have a water quality benefit, but they can also have other benefits and really be used to, in creative ways, to kind of create additional spaces within the right-of-way or adjacent to the right-of-way, and to have beneficial impacts on traffic and pedestrian safety as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Megan, and she's going to talk about project identification.
All right. So we started with those 6,000 catchments I mentioned previously, and from there we wanted to really narrow down those into where the highest benefit projects are located on the ground. So we did a 3-step process, starting with first looking at those 6,000 catchments to find which of them have the highest need. Secondly, we looked at what the best suited treatment systems are within those high priority catchments. And then lastly, we focused on assessing those projects themselves to see which of them provided the most benefits. And then at the end of the day, that's going to be the list of projects. And we'll get to that in a little bit, but first I'm going to step you through what each of these stages included. So step 1, trying to identify the highest priority, highest need locations. So those 6,000 catchments were screened by looking at water quality need based on pollutant generation. We looked at trash, bacteria, nutrients, sediment, and metals on a catchment scale. So the maps over on the right show kind of high pollutant generation to low pollutant generation. And we had these maps for all the different parameters listed here. That we combined with the community need. So looking at which areas had very low tree cover or limited park access. We also looked at areas that were located in an identified underserved community. And then we looked at potential for integration of the Green Streets projects with already planned CIP projects, as well as integration with Caltrans priorities and projects. So we combined water quality and community need to narrow down the 6,000 catchments into the top 80. Then step 2, we looked within each of the top 80 catchments based on many different criteria, but a few of them are listed here. For example, we said how much runoff is going to the site, does it make sense to put something within the right-of-way at that specific location? Is there enough room on the ground to put a surface unit, or do we need to opt for something more like the items Max mentioned, like HDS or drywall, which has a smaller footprint and is below grade? Will the soil allow runoff to percolate? So if you're over a groundwater aquifer, this could be a really great opportunity for groundwater recharge if the soils are good. If they're more clay-like, then you don't really have that as an option. Is there an existing storm drain nearby? So like I mentioned, if you have poor soils and you cannot percolate the treated runoff, then you need to treat and then send the treated runoff to an existing storm drain. But if there's not one nearby, then it doesn't make sense to put a project there. And then lastly, what other types of elements can be integrated? Over on the right, we have kind of a biofilter unit located in a bulb out that may have been a parking area previously. But this provides also a shortened pedestrian route to get across the street, in addition to stormwater treatment and habitat and many of those benefits that I noted previously. So now I'm going to walk you through an example of what this looked like in one of our or multiple actually of our high priority catchments. So priority catchments, like I mentioned, are just a drainage basin. So all the runoff from one area drains to a single point. So the areas shown in the blue outline, each of these are priority catchments. So I'm going to talk through each of them one by one, just to give an example of kind of the process that we were going through. And this will provide context for why the projects are where they are when we get to that point in the presentation. So I'm going to talk through the one on the bottom left first, so the 1.5 acre catchment. So it drains to the northwest towards Sweetwater Road. In looking at this in more detail, we found that there was a private inlet that this area drained to, and that it was actually already treated by a private system. Therefore, although it's a priority catchment, it's already treated, so there's no need to put a Green Street project there. Moving up to the 2.5 acre catchment, that one drains the same direction towards Sweetwater Road. However, it drains to a private inlet again, and there's no adjacent public inlet that we can treat the water using Green Street's project within the right of way. So therefore, that area is also not able to be treated. Moving up to the 7.4 and the 2.2 acre catchments, kind of in more the center of the slide, they drain the same direction. They do drain to public storm drains, so that's great. That means that we can put something in that area, some kind of Green Streets elements, and treat the runoff before it continues down the storm drain. So in terms of assessing what type of project would be feasible there, we first looked at the soils to see if percolation was an option. Unfortunately, the soils here are very clay-like, so that is not feasible. That means that the projects, whatever we put in, will need to have an underdrain to collect that treated runoff. And to make it feasible, we looked for a storm drain within 100 feet of the project site. Luckily for this site, that was an option. So that means that we can put in some kind of Green Streets project with an underdrain. And then the next stage is to say, okay, can it be a surface unit or should it be under the ground? So we looked for an open footprint on or within the right of way, clear of conflicts such as utility boxes, driveways, sewer lines, and things like that. And so the area shown in green, that would be the feasible footprint, avoiding all of those constraints. And so this means that we're able to site a tree well or biofilter in these areas. With, again, the treated runoff would be sent to the storm drain after the pollutants are removed. So this is just one example of what we did, but again, we did that for all of the top 80 catchments, and then we looked at how to prioritize the projects themselves. And so Max is going to take you through the third step.
Thanks, Megan. So yeah, the third step in the process was really to quantify the potential benefits of these various projects or potential projects. And so we wanted to look at this from a multi-benefit perspective, focusing primarily on 3 categories. The first category being environmental benefits, the second social benefits, and then the final category, cost effectiveness. And so from the environmental benefit category, like we mentioned, water quality is kind of our motivating benefit here. We're trying to do these projects so that we can improve water quality within the watersheds to help meet the regulatory goals. But just by the nature of these DMPs, these treatment devices, they also have other environmental benefits, and these include augmentation of local water supplies by putting more water, stormwater into the ground, into groundwater aquifers that can be used for various supplies. This helps reduce dependence on imported water. They can improve flood management, and so by, again, capturing a portion of that water, putting it into the ground, that takes it out of the storm drain and other channels, and that can help reduce the amount of flooding that's seen. It also just helps slow down the water, so instead of getting all that water at the same time, those channels, it slows it down and spreads that out over time a little bit, kind of bends that curve. And then really there's a whole host of other natural environmental benefits associated with these types of practices. And those include things like habitat creation, addition of green space, additional vegetation, which can help capture carbon, helps reduce erosion due to high flows in our conveyance systems, which degrades habitat in streams and receiving waters, and also can reduce temperatures within the right-of-ways themselves, and then also reduce the temperature of the runoff water itself, which has important environmental implications. On the social benefit side, though, these projects can be used to provide or augment additional and important social benefits. So within the transportation corridor, pedestrian safety is always a major concern. And so these projects can be combined with improvements to pedestrian access and combined with addition or kind of replacement or improvement of existing sidewalks, addition of new sidewalks. They can be used to physically separate the sidewalks themselves from the travel ways, which can greatly improve safety. They can be incorporated into bulb outs that help improve pedestrian visibility when people are crossing the streets. And they can also have important environmental justice implications. These can be used to help address historical inequities in pollution and health in various communities throughout the county. They provide opportunities for community involvement. They help improve the aesthetics along the roadways. They add green space. They can help add access or improve access to nearby parks and facilities and community centers. They can be used as public education to increase public education of environmental and stormwater benefits. And I think we've already touched on, but improve mobility and access and traffic safety. So these are all important elements and considerations when selecting and identifying potential projects and evaluating projects for which ones are the best. We don't want to overlook cost, though. Cost is an important component of these projects. They all cost money. And so really looking at how we can maximize the cost, get the most benefit for the amount of spend for each of the projects is an important consideration, so that we can make sure that the available are used to provide the most benefit that can be recognized. So we do want to hear from all of you here, and we do have another poll. So let's bring that up. We've got 2 poll questions here. So based on the information that we've covered, your own experiences, please identify, you can select multiple options here, but which environmental benefits are the most important to you and your community. You can pick one, you can pick multiple, but again, the main ones that we talked about were water quality, water supply, flood management, mitigation, or natural environment, other benefits. So take a minute and select a few there. The second question is, which social benefits are the most important to you and your community? The ones that we highlighted again were pedestrian safety, environmental justice, community involvement, improving the aesthetics, public education, mobility and access, or traffic safety. So again, take a few minutes. You can select multiple here. You can select one, but we can help. We can use some of this feedback to help inform the kind of which benefits that we are highlighting and emphasizing, and make sure that we are maximizing them, or trying to maximize them as part of this program. So let's see what our results are. Good mix from question number 1. We've got about 50%, of little over half are identifying water quality as their primary environmental benefit. Tied with that is flood management. And then ranked, I guess, 3rd would be natural environment, and then water supply coming in behind that. And then as far as social benefits, big vote for pedestrian safety. Almost all the audience, 70%, has identified pedestrian safety. Environmental justice, again, a big priority, as well as aesthetic improvements, tied with 57%, and then we've got traffic safety and mobility. So thank you for that feedback. It's helpful in helping us identify and rank these projects. So our next slide shows, based on kind of that triple benefit ranking, and some initial work that we've done, shows that top 30 kind of potential project locations throughout the county and throughout the study area. So the green dots on the map identify potential Green Street Clean Water projects that are within the study area. They're shown also within each watershed. And then the pie chart on the right identifies what we've used at this point to kind of rank and assign points to prioritize projects. So the biggest portion is towards water quality and environment, and a good portion is attributed to community benefits, and then cost effectiveness is also considered. So one of the next steps that we're going to be doing is developing full life cycle costs for our top 30 projects, and kind of reprioritizing and making sure that we are getting the most benefit based on the available project funding. So one of the things to note also that as a result of kind of the water quality ranking and quantification process is really, we get that maximum benefit by maximizing the amount of pollutant that's removed from the BMPs. And typically that means that these are focused in land uses that have a higher pollutant concentration. So those are typically your commercial or industrial land uses. And so many of the projects that we've identified, the potential projects, are going to be treating those areas. And we'll see a couple examples here. But this figure here identifies those same projects in relation to the various community planning areas, and the ones listed here, planning groups, are the ones that have projects, potential projects identified in them. So from Fallbrook up in the north, down to Otay down in the bottom. And we've got two examples here that we'll show through, one up north and then one down towards Spring Valley. So our first example is along South Mission Road in Fallbrook. It's within the San Luis Rey River watershed. There's a graphic here on the right. It shows the approximate location up in the top right. The blue areas are the prioritized catchments, and then the dark shaded blue areas are the areas that the potential BMPs or Green Streets treatment elements would actually provide water quality treatment for. So we see there's a good corridor of high priority catchments along South Mission Road. And that's combined with a number of opportunities to actually physically place potential Green Streets BMPs within the existing right-of-way. And so there's good opportunity to provide treatment and removal of pollutants within these catchments. A few statistics and points on this project has the potential to treat at least 11 acres of impervious area, of contributing impervious area. So far, we've identified up to 10,000 square feet of treatment BMPs. So those are a combination of tree wells or biofiltration units that we talked about earlier, as well as a few hydrodynamic separator units where there's tighter constraints and less opportunity to put a larger footprint BMP. Some of the other factors and why this is a higher priority project is because it is identified as an underserved community. Green Street strategies were identified within the WQIP for this watershed. It helps address some of the priority pollutants, which include fecal coliform, which has a TMDL, TSS, and nitrogen nutrients. It's also in the highest tier of our ranking of our projects for pollutant load reduction, and the highest tier for pedestrian need. So the pedestrian gap analysis scores here are low, meaning there's an opportunity to provide a lot of benefit for pedestrian access, safety, and mobility by combining Green Streets with sidewalk improvements in this project. The next example is along Sweetwater Road. This is in the San Diego Bay watershed. Similar size treatment. It would treat 12 acres of impervious area, but we've got twice as much BMP area available here. We've identified up to 20,000 square feet so far of tree wells and biofiltration opportunity. You see a good number of catchments kind of down at the bottom of the screen, and then a few up further on the north too. And this was the highest ranked potential project by social benefit scores. Again, it would provide benefits in an underserved community. It helps address, could potentially help address some identified traffic safety improvements or needs and intersections and segments of the road. and again, helps address some of the priority pollutants within the watershed, and is in the highest tier for pollutant load reduction and for pedestrian improvement. So that's again why this project ranks very high within our initial ranking. So as sort of a pilot demonstration, this project was not a part of this Green Streets Clean Water Plan, but it's a good illustration and example of what one of these projects actually looks like within the county. The Mapleview Green Streets project is a project that the county has in final design right now. And we're just going to walk through what that looks like. So along Mapleview Street, it's about 3/4 of a mile of the street. The project proposes to install almost 6,000 square feet of biofiltration basins and then 3,000 square feet of dispersion areas. It will also includes over 2,500 square feet or linear feet, sorry, of new sidewalk, and would treat runoff from a 38-acre impervious, 38-acre drainage area. So what is this? What could this project look like? We've got a few slides that show before and after. So before we see some of the opportunity for Green Streets, we've got a very wide parking area. So there's underutilized space within the right-of-way. We've got a bike lane that's kind of floating out here. And then you can even see some of the pollutants, some of the sediment that are within the parking area. And so you can imagine when it rains, all the sediment and anything that's in it is going to get picked up, carried into the storm drains, and dropped into the creeks with any pollutants that's with it. So how can we add some improvement and have some benefit here? So the picture on the bottom shows addition of biofiltration basins along kind of the bottom of that crib wall. It pops out and makes better use of that wide parking area, and adds improved sidewalk along the length, and then some improvements to the bike lane as well. And these are just concept renderings. The final design might look a little bit different than this, but it gives us an idea of what these projects could look like. Next slide. Here's another section of the project. So again, here we see sidewalk improvements. And this location, the sidewalk's actually been set back from the street a bit. It's separated with a dispersion area along the cobbles here, and then improvements to an existing conveyance. You see the culvert crossing there to the left of the sidewalk. But also note that this sidewalk has been upgraded to be compliant with ADA requirements, which improves mobility for various users and improves the overall pedestrian experience and safety. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Renee, and he's going to let you know what we can expect kind of out of the rest of the program.
Thank you, Max. So we have a lot of information to give you, but at the same time, we want to make sure that we give you, an outline of what we're expecting with this program. So the Green Streets Clean Water Plan is expected to be completed in the spring of 2022. And some of the expectations are that, we're going to give an overview of location and project selection and the process. So it's going to give you a menu also to benefit-driven menu of prioritized projects. So it's going to show along the way and how this plan can be used in the future for prioritizing projects. We're going to include an example project concept, so a schematic similar to what we're showing you before, but with a little bit more detail. And because this is a plan that will help us shape the way in how we're implementing Green Streets projects, we're going to include some suggestions and guidance on how to streamline future Green Streets projects. How could those projects be implemented a lot faster? Next slide. And this is some of the outline as to what the timeline is going to look like. Like I said, in the spring of 2022 is when we're expecting to complete the Green Streets Clean Water Plan. So for every project will stand on its own, and the timeline for every project will vary. So for example, design will take typically up to 2 years. And after that, it can take up to 1 year per project for construction. So a lot of it depends on, you know, funding and awarding the contract for construction. So, you know, keep in mind that yes, we'll have a plan, we'll have projects, but it'll take some time to see those projects getting implemented in the ground. Next slide. So we have opportunities for you to get involved further on. You have the Green Streets Clean Water Plan website, and there's the link. Now the website has got a lot of information. It includes a video, more or less, of what we're talking about. This video, it's about 2 minutes, and you can share it with your neighbors. The video is available in both English and Spanish. There's a survey that we have that you can take. We want to hear from you, and because we want to identify, you know, key stakeholders and community groups. And the survey is available in English and Spanish and additional languages like Vietnamese, Arabic, Chinese, and Tagalog. So you can definitely answer the questions on the survey, and those will be in any of those languages, and those will be taking into account. You can definitely sign up for future project updates. There's a newsletter, and the link is included in the Green Streets Clean Water website. And then you can also volunteer to help to protect the water resources. There's I Love a Clean San Diego, which is a program, and the website is listed there. And there's also Project Clean Water, and you can take the pledge for 52 ways to love your water. And you know, there's a lot of ways you can help, but those two are the main ones that we can provide you right now. Next slide, please. And for any other related information, there's also the County of San Diego Watershed Protection Program website, and it's sandiego.gov/stormwater. That will give you to the landing page. That will also show you the link to the Green Streets Clean Water Plan in one of the banners. And there's also a green infrastructure icon, which will list you all the projects that are currently their watershed protection program projects that are capital improvement program and that are currently in development. You can also go to the Project Clean Water website, and that will give you information about what's happening in the world of watersheds in San Diego County. Next. And we also ask you that, you know, please submit your questions in the Q&A window if you haven't already. We have actually posted the Q&A from the last webinar at our greenstreetscleanwater.org website. And any questions that we get here will also be, those will be added to the list of questions. So there'll be a comprehensive list of questions from both the past webinar and the current webinar. So we would like to thank you for joining us tonight. We appreciate your attendance and input. And please feel free to visit the Green Streets Clean Water Program website at www.greenstreetscleanwater.org. My name, phone number, and email address is listed there. And you can contact me after the webinar also for any questions. We have done other presentations, so we take presentations upon request. And like I said before, please submit your questions at the Q&A window, and then we'll take them from there. Just wanted to mention that the next presentation that we have is for the Spring Valley Community Planning Group, and that will be next Tuesday evening. All right, we have a question. Are type 4 protected bike lanes under consideration for Mapleview or any of these other projects?
Specifically for Mapleview, they are not considered for that project. But we are looking at where there are opportunities to do the type 4 protected bike lanes. These are a bit challenging within the existing built environment. Within the right of way, we have a lot of priorities that we're trying to fit into a very limited space. So we do try to look at where there might be some of those chances. I'll go ahead and jump into that second question. Will tree wells be designed so that the trees will not buckle pavement as they mature? It's a great potential for urban forestry here. Yes, I mean, the design of the tree wells themselves and the biofiltration media that they're in is helps support the trees to send their roots down rather than horizontally. It essentially, instead of putting your tree ball right onto the hard soil, it gives a lot of volume for those roots to get established and to really move them down. This is a huge priority for us to ensure that we're not creating problems with sidewalks as well as the roadways. So these are great. They really are a great solution to getting trees out there. And we are looking at them from the benefit of providing greenery to the community.
Next question, will tree wells be designed so the tree well will not buckle pavement? Okay, that was the first question. I just wanted to add to that question that yes, we're looking at ways to plant the trees along the public right of way next to the sidewalk and the curb and gutter so that the roots can grow in a manner that they're not affecting the sidewalk or the adjacent pavement. And there's ways to do that. And not only will the roots not affect the sidewalk, but the trees will be able to grow much taller than in most constrained scenarios.
I'll jump in and answer the question about Quarry Road. The question is, PDS has dropped the Quarry Road project and its flood avoidance potential. Would this project have been of value to your program? That area, it was included in this analysis, but it really doesn't have storm drain infrastructure where we can capture the runoff into our conveyance system and be able to funnel it through treatment systems. We do pay attention to some of those projects and we try to look for opportunities, but in the particular analysis we did, the area did not become a priority area.
Yeah, feel free to type your questions because we do have a few more minutes. These are all great questions. Okay, we have one more regarding vector control. Could this program create standing water and thus breed mosquitoes? Good question.
Another good question. I can take this one. So all of the BMPs that we are considering are based on the county's Green Street Standard drawings. And those have been developed by modifying kind of typical green infrastructure BMP design plans plans and practices to fit within and adjacent to the right of way and travel areas. And so one of the things that's typically done for specifically Green Streets BMPs is to limit the depth of surface ponding of those BMPs, because if you have deep standing water next to a travelway, there can be safety issues associated with that. What that also does is help reduce the potential for vector issues by limiting that surface ponding. Particularly in BMPs that have an underdrain, there's kind of a backup mechanism. They're not fully dependent on just infiltration to draw that surface ponding down. That underdrain really provides that second mechanism, gets that water off the surface of the BMP and into the storm drain. So vector issues are typically not a concern with the types of BMPs that we're looking at, and they've been designed specifically to mitigate that potential risk.
Great question. And we still have a few more minutes, so please feel free to type in your question. If there's any more questions, my name and contact information is listed in the slide. And that's my desk phone number, and that's my email address.
And we will also take suggestions as well. So if you have ideas how we can reach out to the community and people in it who might be interested about hearing what the plan is coming together as, let us know. Put that in the chat, take the survey. There's some open-ended responses and opportunities there to provide additional information. We would love to hear from other people in the community. And if you can help us do that, please do.
Like I said before, we're also making other presentations along the way, and that will help us get additional feedback and shape the plan as we're hoping to complete it by the spring of 2022. If there's no more questions, we'd like to thank everybody for attending, and please feel free to visit the Green Streets Clean Water Program website at www.greenstreetscleanwater.org, and you can also ask questions, and feel free to fill out the survey if you haven't already. Thank you very much, and have a great evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night.